final presentation of the morning is licensed forest preschools. And I was speaking to the presenters earlier, and they said, don't be afraid of licensure. It's not as bad as you think. In fact, it's pretty easy. It's pretty fun, and it expands what you can do. But if we aren't there, you got two experts here that they're going to give you some great information, but also they're around for the next couple of days. Corner them and pull that knowledge out of them. So can I please call forward Ilya Schmulenson and Mary Faith Decker from the Lime Hollow Nature Center in New York, Finger Lakes.
Thank you.
It's not so hard, you can do it.
Wow. Thank you very much. My name is Ilya Schmulenson. I'm the Executive Director at the Lime Hollow Nature Center in Cortland, New York.
And
You get that one.
thank you. I'm Mary Faith Decker, and I am the Director of the Forest Preschool Program.
Great. Cortland, New York, for those of you who don't know, is in central New York in the Finger Lakes region, where just east of Ithaca, New York, and just south of Syracuse, so in a really incredibly beautiful, amazing spot. This morning, many of you woke up and you got dressed to go to a conference. You put on your dress shoes, you put on your slacks, you put on your button-down shirts, and you ventured, however it is that you got to this room, to do the work that we are doing here. I want you to picture Jim. Jim is a licenser. He licenses child daycares. And Jim is used to licensing child daycares that are indoors. He put on his shoes, he put on his slacks. Whoop. Okay. He put on his shoes, he put on his slacks, and he got to the office, and he had a list there from the Lime Hollow Nature School about all of the great things that they were going to do outside in central New York throughout the year. And he had some questions, and he wanted to know, how are we going to do fire drills outside? And how are we going to have alarms on our doors outside? And it was time for his meeting with Lime Hollow, and so he got in his car and he came out to Lime Hollow to meet with us to go through this list. And again, Jim was wearing his slacks and his shoes because this is the way that he dresses to work, right? Because this is the way that the world works. And so he got to Lime Hollow and met with Mary Faith and her team there, and they were going back and forth about all these various things, and it just happened to be, we have a pond at Lime Hollow called Gracie Pond, and there are quite a few geese there at that pond. Well, naturally, they walk around the grounds, and they leave what Mary Faith affectionately calls green Tootsie Rolls everywhere. And Jim looked down at the ground and said, "Is that feces?" And we said, "Yes, we have geese here on our property." And he said, "Well, you can't have kids out here with all these feces. You're going to have to clean all of this up. And in fact, when you go out into the woods, the first thing you're going to have to do is send an instructor out into the woods, scout out the area, make sure you decide where you're going to be, scout out the area, and remove all the feces before you take your kids there." Because Jim was uncomfortable. That was not a setting that he was used to operating in. And what we did at Lime Hollow was we said, okay, how about this? And this is actually a really interesting thing that we say at Lime Hollow. We say, "How about this?" quite a lot. We say, okay, how about this? We hear what you're saying. We will do that, but we will bring some kids with us. And we will also bring some guidebooks. And while we search for feces to remove from this area, we will see if we can identify them. And maybe we'll come up with a list of different animals that live here at Lime Hollow, and see if we can identify, is this animal, is this animal? And you know what, Jim, let's go into the woods, come, let's go check it out. And Jim looked down at his shoes, and he looked down at his slacks, and he said, "You know what, I think you guys are fine." okay? You know what you're doing. And so this is a story about questioning and pushing back and questioning what is normal and what are we trying to do with our children and how are we trying to raise our children. And so the Lime Hollow Nature Center, which is actually a combination of about 600 acres of property in central New York, started with a group of people questioning a plan. So the Lime Hollow Nature Center was based around a railway there was a railway that ran through, that ran along a lot of marl ponds, and those marl ponds were mined, or the marl was mined out of there for building materials. And so when the mining company went out of business, there was this question of, are we going to revert this, are we going to sell this area back to private landowners, or are we going to kind of incorporate it? What are we going to do with this? And a lot of forward-thinking researchers, folks at the at SUNY Cortland, which is the state university, said, you know what, there are a lot of birds here. There is a lot of interesting geological features. It's an area that is built from from glaciers moving. Right next to an acidic bog, you have an alkaline pond. You have 350 species of birds and animals. And they said, you know what, we'd like to preserve this area, and how are we gonna do that? And so this was in the late 60s, and by the early 90s, it took until then for Lime Hollow to actually become incorporated as a nonprofit. And very early on, we recognized that what we needed to promote was a connection to nature. And that started with kids. And so we offered a program called Nature's Keepers, which was a caregiver and me type program where folks come for an hour and a half with their caregiver and explore the various trails that we had at Lime Hollow. Well, that program started to get popular. And the hour and a half, one day a week, turned into an hour and a half Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then people started to just hang out. And then we started offering a program that was a drop-off program, where we would take care of the kids while the parents or the caregivers were able to do something else. And then that started to get popular. And the kids were staying longer and longer, and we had really multi-age groups, probably 2.5 to about 10 years old, all together.
Show the picture. There it is.
There it is, yeah. All together, people being together. Now, what happened was, as we were starting to do this, is we started bumping into licensing guidelines, which say that if you're meeting for more than 4 hours a day, multiple times a week, you now have to become a licensed childcare facility. Now that's really scary. What does that mean? You need staff, you need people to apply for things. Who's gonna check up on us? Are they gonna say no? What happens when they say no? There are a whole list of things that are scary about being licensed, but there are a whole list of things that are really interesting and positive about being licensed. Not everybody has a caregiver. Not every child has a caregiver that could stay with them throughout the day. Many children rely on childcare, and many parents rely on childcare facilities to be able to go to work, make a living, things like that. And so we sort of stepped into this problem or it's not really a problem, we stepped into this opportunity of what is possible when you redefine childcare with the Forest Preschool model. And one of the very interesting things, and I'm a father of two. I have a almost 5-year-old and an 18-month-old, and both my wife and I work. And we, I'm just gonna share this. So we did our taxes recently, and we spent $25,000 on childcare last year for 2 children. We are 2 working adults with relatively well-paying jobs. We spent $25,000 last year just on childcare, nothing else. And the positive thing that, and like I said, we are relatively well off. But the fact that we are licensed, that Lime Hollow Preschool is licensed, allows Lime Hollow and Lime Hollow families to access funds through the state of New York, through Cortland County, designed for childcare, for helping families get childcare. And that is a huge equity issue in this type of work. If you look at forest preschools around the country, if you look at this type of education around the country, Deanie just said this, you know, they are relatively homogeneous, and this is an opportunity for us. And in Cortland County, while we do not have a large racial diversity, we have quite a bit of rural poverty, and quite a bit of separation between what is possible in child care settings. And so we chose to really lean into this model, both because we believe that nature is for everybody, because we believe that child care this is the best way to provide child care. And I'm gonna let Mary Faith talk a little bit about how we went about that.
Thank you, Ilya, for sharing the story of how we began. So we were a big group of feral children in the forest, a multi-age group we were about 2.5 years old to about 8. And we ran wild in the forest and we were very happy. But as Ilya said, we were getting big and we needed to figure out how we were going to keep growing. And so we were very motivated by the idea of access. We knew that childcare was a big need in our community, and so by becoming licensed, we would be able to offer our program to more and more families. So that was the motivation that got us through it took a full year to achieve licensure, and it was a busy year full of a lot of meetings. So it was a barrier, but I'm here to say today it's worth fighting through. So I had lines in the sand when it came to like licensing this program. I loved what I was doing. I loved the learning that I was seeing with these kids, but there were certain aspects of our program that I felt were fundamental to our program, and I was not willing to give those up in order to be licensed, so I was very motivated to work through these issues. So those are the things that we all love to do in the forest: tree climbing, fire starting. We have a campfire every single day. It's our gathering place for storytelling, for community, for eating, for making tea. We cook on the fire all the time. And the children learn to start fires, and I think that makes them safer in the world because they understand and respect fire. So these are fundamental things that I wasn't willing to give up. We use tools in the forest, and can you imagine like the licensor coming into this, right? So I'm here to say, don't give up. We did it, and here's how. Thank you. So here we are in a pond. A lot of the things that we do in the forest are risky play. So what's a licensor to think about this, right? At this time, big gratitude to Antioch University. I just completed the nature-based early childhood certificate program there, and at the time I believe they were the only university offering that, though I believe more universities are offering nature-based early childhood, and I think it's really important. And that was the foundation that I built this program on, and it gave us a huge leap forward. So I had just completed risk-benefit analysis for nature-based programs, so I felt very strong coming into this. We have a risky play activity, sliding on the ice, right? So what we do, and we do it the same way every time, we call the whole staff in, all the teaching staff, and we say, look, here's a risky activity that we'd like to do with the kids. And so the first list we make when we whiteboard it is all the benefits. What are the benefits of sliding on the ice? It's a gross motor activity, there's proprioception issues. You have to like kind of be in community with other people. You can't slam into them. It gives you a unique perspective. This is the pond that they look out at every day when they come to program. But here they are in the middle of the pond looking back at their program space. It's an interesting perspective. Okay, so we make this list of all the benefits of this risky play activity. That's what gets us through the risk part of it, right? Because otherwise it'd be too scary. So the next list we make is the scary list. What are all the things that could go wrong? And there are lots, right? They could fall through the ice. You know, that's scary. So once we get the whole list of all the things that could go wrong, we take those things one at a time and we say, what is a mitigation that we can do to make that risk go from high to low? Because it's worth doing. So here we're going to do the work of doing the mitigations. And so, in this example, this pond is 18 inches deep. So we don't do sliding on the ice on Baldwin Pond that's 25 feet deep, right? We do it on Turtle Pond because it's shallow. If someone finds a weak spot in the ice, we can haul them back out. It's a lower risk, right? So for every risk, we work up a mitigation plan. And then that immediately goes into protocols. Here are our protocols for sliding on the ice. We have these protocols for tree climbing. We have them for fires. We have them for pond play, stream play, cold weather. We're in upstate New York. It's very cold. So we have cold weather protocols. We use, NOAA's wind chill chart to help us determine how many minutes we can be outside on a particular day and not risk a cold weather injury. So we've developed protocols and they've gone right into our standard operating procedures. So when OCFS, which is our regulatory agency, said to us, but what about tree climbing? I was like, oh yes, here's our protocols, take a look. And when they saw that we had thought through every single aspect of all the things that could go wrong and mitigated it, they were like, oh, you're not just out there willy-nilly. And so every time that we were presented with a question like that and we presented our protocols, their confidence in our program grew and grew. And throughout that year, when we would come up against goose species, it became like a back and forth that was friendly because now we were in relationship with our regulators. So
I think that's a great point because I think a lot of the regulations are written for indoor spaces, and the fears of regulators and licensors who say no are actually not written down. And so when the licensor says no, you can't go out onto the pond. Hang on, let me see if I can go. You can't go out onto the pond and have your kids do this, which is they're sliding around, there's a little kid running away. You can't do that. And we get to say, where is it written that we cannot do that? And they say, well, it's not written. And then we get to have a follow-up conversation that says, what are you worried about? We're worried about the kids falling through. We're worried about all of these things. And like Mary Faith said, we get to say, great, we've thought about all of those things as well. And they get to see that these are not some willy-nilly things. And so I just moved to central New York from central Texas. We do not have weather like this in central Texas. It is quite cold in central New York, and my daughter is part of the preschool. So cold weather gear is really essential. Now, not everybody has cold weather gear. And again, that's another equity piece. Not everybody has cold weather gear. Not everybody has access to skis and snowshoes and activities that happen in the snow, which are historically, which are expensive. Let's just say the gear is expensive, the activities are expensive. And so we're able to actually provide an experience for kids that they might not have been able to do otherwise. And we have extra gear every once in a while. My daughter comes home and she is wearing a completely different set of clothes, and I have no idea whose clothes these are. And I say, whose clothes are you wearing? And she says, that's Lime Hollow's. I got wet. We went inside. They changed us. And then we went back outside and we spent all day sliding and sledding, which is great. Now, OCFS, the Office of Child and Family Services, did say there are certain things we will not budge on. We have certain things that are written down that you need to follow through on. And I will let you take care of that.
We had to wash our hands a lot. When we were a big feral group in the forest, we consumed a lot of dirt, I think. But actually, some of their regulations are good. We did need to wash our hands a little bit more. But that was a barrier for a little while. How do we do this out in the forest? We have 600 acres in conservation that we can prowl around on. So how do we wash our hands when we're way out there? We thought through a lot of different plans, and finally we settled on this cart. So on this cart is 5 gallons of water, soap, and compostable paper towels. On this cart are our journals, because we love those. On this cart is a change of clothes for every single child that the parents send. And then there's a few more changes of clothes because sometimes we fall in a big puddle twice, you know? And on this cart has everything that we need, including hammocks and some bedding, depending on where we're going for the day. So this was the piece that really helped OCFS understand that we took their regulations seriously. And so it wasn't just them bending to us, you know, we bend to them as well. And a lot of those changes were actually very good.
So the state of New York does have a guidance that says they license preschools by indoor square footage. Indoor square footage. So you can say that we're going to spend the majority of our time inside or outside, and our program is going to be inside, and they're going to say indoor square footage if you would like to be licensed. Now, we know that there are some other states that have gone beyond that, and we're excited to work with New York State to go beyond that. But we are lucky enough that we have an indoor facility that is now licensed, so it's 35 square feet per child. We're like kind of like cage-free chickens as opposed to free-range chickens, if you know how that gets determined. But we do have indoor space, and we use it as needed. But I will tell you, as the executive director of an organization that has a large building standing there, that building is empty most of the time because the kids are outside, where they should be.
So here we are in upstate New York. Shout out to Ann Stiers, who taught me how to do this. We nap wherever we are. That was a barrier too. A lot of programs ask me, but what about napping? We do have the little cots, and sometimes when we're near our building, we might throw them out in the lawn and put the kids out there for a sunny nap. There's times when it's raining and we go under a pavilion or other covered shelter, and we use the cots in that situation. But most of the time, we hang hammocks out in the forest, and we've figured out a system of cold weather sleeping bags that really does keep them toasty warm inside there. So, you know, all the barriers are easy to see, but there are solutions for every single one of them. And I feel like it's visionary to start a program like this, but the real nuts and bolts of it is that I learned all these pieces from other programs, and it's by having relationships between all of our programs that we share these ideas. One of the biggest, most important steps to getting licensed for us was the field trip, the idea of a field trip. Our building is licensed. Every licensed program in New York State has to have an outdoor licensed spot too. We built a fence around part of our yard, basically. And so those two places are licensed. Anytime we're not in those two areas, we're on a field trip. Parents sign a waiver in the beginning of the school year that says, yes, I understand that my child will be on a field trip every day. And so that space is considered unlicensed space and field trip space. So that is another way that helped us move our kids deeper into the forest where we wanted them to be. So all of these ideas were gathered from other programs, and they were put into this soup that is now our program. The process was long. We learned a lot, but I consider this an open source kind of project. If you want help with licensing, contact me, contact us. On our Lime Hollow website, you can reach us. I will share any of our protocols, the parent handbook, anything that will help you get your program outdoors. I'm more than happy to share. I was shared with very generously along this path, and I feel in community with all of us doing this work. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Faith. Thank you. Okay, so we have a question from Kevin. And are you working on specific outdoor licensing? Specific outdoor licensing.
So I think we are not I think the licensing that we are talking about is as a child care facility, which allows us to provide a program. Our early care kids show up at 7:30, and our last care kids leave at 5:30. And they can sign up for 2 days, 3 days, or 5 days, like my daughter, who's always there very late. And that allows us to do work. That allows us to go to work. So the licensing that we are talking about is as a child care facility, just like any daycare that you would go to send your kids to. And so far, we haven't applied for anything that any kind of activities that would specifically limit us for outdoor things.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. So folks, I've learned so much, and I'm a newbie to this universe. I want to go out and be in the snow. I live in Atlanta. I want to go be in the snow. I want to go hiking with my baby. I want to, all of this. If you'd be willing to stay, if anyone had any additional questions, but we don't want to get in trouble by not feeding you. So right next door is the box lunch. You can bring it back in. You can go out. You could go outside. Okay. But we thank you so much for your time and attention. And let's hear it for our speakers, Ilya and Mary Faith, Christiane and Gary, and Deanie and Jessica. Thank you so much.